Today on Ag News Daily.
If we go globally and we look at nitrogen right now for urea, it is 100% still supply problem.
I think what we learned here in 25, no matter if you're north, south, east, or west, is the importance of residuals. And we learned about diseases this year, unfortunately.
Welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. We are sitting live in Kansas City this week at the National Association of Farm Broadcasting annual convention. Michelle, it's been an action-packed week.
We've had a lot of conversations and do want to share that. I am so excited that you're going to be the new president-elect of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. So it's just really cool to hear perspectives and to see other people in the industry.
Absolutely. We're going to have a lot of great conversations coming up on the podcast. I unfortunately haven't been able to make it outside much this week, but we do have snow developing as one of our themes for forecasts ahead. Forecasters are saying that this week is going to have some mild weather, but we will see a surge of colder air, expecting to move in around Thanksgiving and moving east with time. Looking ahead, multiple forecast models agree that early December could bring Arctic air into the U.S., while repeated atmospheric cutoffs are preventing major early winter storms for now. A more active national pattern is expected once northern and southern jet streams reconnect in December. In the Midwest, we're going to see some scattered showers, or we saw some earlier this week that provided some moisture, and we're going to see a larger system here later this week provide some more widespread rain, mainly to the south. Another storm early next week could further improve some soil conditions and ease drought conditions, but behind it, very cold air is projected to settle in for Thanksgiving. That might make our turkey trot run a little cold, Michelle. So we'll see lots of colder patterns here post-Thanksgiving, and that could bring an early end to some of the field work we're seeing happening across northern areas.
Well, this week we finally got the first crop progress report in quite a few weeks. 6 missed updates. The USDA has now released its first crop progress report since the government shutdown ended. Corn harvest is now at 91% complete, running slightly behind the 5-year average of 94%. Certainly see a lot of fields being empty, and that's good to see. Here, soybean harvest has reached 95%, nearly matching the seasonal norm, and winter wheat planting is about 92% complete, about 3 points behind the 5-year average. And there's certainly a lot of reports that are now coming out from the USDA. Well, at this week, we're here at the NAFB convention, like we mentioned, and we ask industry leaders 2 questions. First, what did they learn here in 2025?
I think what we learned here in 25, no matter if you're north, south, east, or west, is the importance of residuals. And we learned about diseases this year, unfortunately. Season-long weed control was something we had to have. We had a ton of rain. We had a ton of disease pressure. At the end of the day, that's probably the big take-home is we need to really improve upon that for next year.
2025 was a challenge for most growers. 24 and 23 were tough. 25, most people were hopeful it was going to go a lot better. Last January, the USDA report was positive, gave us really good prices, but after February, we just kind of leaked off throughout the year. Never had a weather opportunity, if you will, but we came in here this fall expecting very poor prices, and fortunately, as you and I talk, we're a couple 3 days removed from 15-month highs in soybeans. So we've seen that these markets can change very rapidly. Sometimes when we think there's no hope, there actually is some hope, and so we've got a trade deal in place now, supposedly. That should be a real asset for us moving forward.
What did we learn from 2025? Well, let's just take a little step back here and kind of rehash what 2025 brought us. So on one end, 2025 was a hot, dry year. It started off maybe cold and wet in other parts, but certainly kind of the tale of two evils as far as weed control is concerned. You had some pre-emerge herbicide applications did go out, but maybe we didn't get the activating rains that we needed. But then on the flip side, maybe it was so wet that spray rigs were getting stuck in the fields. So it was quite challenging, to say the least, when it came to early season pre-herbicide weed control. Looking ahead, farmers are actually really optimistic about 2026 and pretty excited about the progress that we've made as far as controlling weeds into the future.
I hate to repeat a nightmare, but previous couple years we had droughts and didn't raise anything, and 24 was better, 25 was better yet. So our yields this year, we had late season moisture, and here we go. We got yields 20% better than our previous averages were. And but the bad thing was we had late season moisture. Our quality was not quite as good because here again we made more production than what we were planning on. But with the good genetics we got, it's still a good quality wheat. And I followed the chain and went down to a lot of I'm in western Kansas. A lot of this wheat is gets on a rail, goes down to Mexico. And I talked with importers down there, 7 of the top 10, and they said they love U.S. wheat on the fact that it's consistent, it's got a big kernel, they love milling it, and it worked perfect for their, I call it their daily sandwich bread. And that really started the thought process that you should always plan ahead looking to next year, that you should always hope for the good times and don't just be what I call reserved and say, oh, it's never going to rain again or it's going to be terrible. Yeah, put something out there so if you do get extra rains, you're going to have excellent quality.
2025 was definitely challenging. I live in Mississippi, but I cover the U.S. and obviously we had a lot of prevent plant that happened based on soil moisture and a lot of other things, a lot of environmental conditions. Obviously, we had some challenges around commodity prices. The thing I would take away from 26 is the resilience of our producers. They are the most resilient group in the world. This is definitely not the worst time they've been through, but it's not the best either. So we're hoping for an improved situation as we get into 2026.
What did we learn in 2025? 3 out of 4 growers that chose to use next to biologicals were better off, meaning they put more money in their pocket than those that chose not to.
I think we learned that Mother Nature is going to throw as many curveballs at farmers as possible. And so those growers that had a plan with their dealer, the ones that really planned for longer gaps between sprays, not being able to get in the field as quickly as possible, and also proactively planning with the fungicide to guard against those diseases that'll crop up or those environmental stressors. Those are the ones that really saw success this past year.
The second question we asked is, what are some 2026 expectations?
More of the same, probably. And I think we also know that spending money on things like interest rates doesn't really help grow crops. So we're committed to our 0% financing program. Let's get that proactive plan built with the retailer, the one that's the most flexible, the one that also is looking at the broadest spectrum of control possible in a bunch of different areas. That's the one that's going to win out when I'm sure 26 is going to be as challenging as 25.
2026, obviously, we're hoping to see a bounce back on commodity prices. Hopefully, Mother Nature will cooperate a little better and we won't have as many preventive plant acres that we had in the Mid-South last year. And just looking for really a successful campaign as we get into making sure that we're offering producers the best way to optimize their investments that they have in their crops.
Expectations, I think it's going to be another challenging year. We always seem to have plenty of stress out there year in and year out. So my expectations would be that growers that choose to manage their crop intensively throughout the 2026 growing season and consider using products like next to biologicals to minimize their stress are once again going to fare better than those that choose not to implement a strategy such as next to biologicals.
So in 2026, right now, things look a little more upbeat than what they did in 25. The one caveat, of course, our fertilizer prices are quite high still. It looks like we could get some relief there, taking tariffs off of imported fertilizer. It might give us an opportunity to buy some of that fertilizer a little cheaper. But from a commodity market standpoint, corn and soybeans look like they're going to start out as good or better than what they did a year ago. Beans should be higher than what they were a year ago. That would be a real asset for farmers. Give them a chance to maybe manage some risk, lock in some worst case scenarios that are actually in the black.
I know it's a tight ag economy no matter where you're at. I think growers are starting to realize the few extra dollars we spend on the front end of our weed control programs can pay huge dividends and also take some pressure off our in-season residuals, whether that's corn, soybeans, canola, sugar beets. Pick your commodity, residuals will never fail us.
So right now we've actually planted higher quality end product grains, and I'm hoping that we can consume, or I call it, go more so to our mills in the U.S. and then let everybody else ship their wheat out to the other countries. But the biggest thing is at the end of the day, I want to have a sustainable, good quality wheat with a very good end product that is as good as it gets.
So for 2026, I would suspect that we're going to continue to see weeds. We're going to have difficulty controlling weeds. There's going to continue to be resistance issues into the future, but we need to continue to preserve the tools that we have available to us, right? And at BASF, we are committed to helping farmers do the biggest job on earth. And through that, we continue to invest in R&D and bring new products to our farmers and our customers. In fact, by 2030, I believe we have another 20 products coming down the pipeline. So we have a very vast pipeline, which our farmers should be excited about.
Well, it's certainly been a filled week where we're really looking forward to sharing with you all those conversations that we've had. And later on here today, it'll be a Josh Linville of a fertilizer update.
Yeah, and I don't know if our listeners can hear it, but we've got broadcasters broadcasting all around us. So just a different energy here being in Kansas City. Shareholders of both Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern have reached an overwhelmingly approved and proposed merger between the two major railroads. Union Pacific says 99.5% of votes cast supported issuing new shares to complete the deal, while Norfolk Southern reported 99% support from its shareholders. Under the plan, NS shareholders would receive one share of Union Pacific stock plus nearly $89 in cash for each NS share. The merger still faces significant pushback from other railroads, including BNSF and CPKC, who argue the deal would reduce competition and drive up costs. A bipartisan group of 9 state attorney generals have also urged the Surface Transportation Board to scrutinize the merger, warning it could lead to higher prices and poorer service for shippers and consumers. The Surface Transportation Board, which is an independent 5-member panel that must approve any railroad merger, is expected to receive the formal application in December 2025. The board currently has only 3 seated members, with 1 vacancy tied up in legal challenges. Regulators will weigh in whether the merger would enhance competition, which is the legal threshold, not simply maintain it. Supporters of this deal say a combined UP-NS system could improve efficiency and reduce costly freight handoffs, giving ag shippers better access to markets on both coasts. Opponents say further consolidation will leave farmers and agribusinesses with fewer rail options, less leverage, and the risk of higher rates. Many in the industry have also warned that if this merger moves forward, it could spark additional consolidation among the remaining major railroads. So those are a few of the details there from that ongoing headline, Michelle.
Certainly a lot of news this week, including that the Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have released a new proposed definitions of waters of the United States. The latest update following the Supreme Court's Sackett decision. Hear a lot of those that we'll hear here shortly, but the proposal would narrow Federal Clean Waters Act jurisdiction to traditional navigable waters and only those wetlands with a continuous surface connection to them. Tributaries would qualify for regulation only if they directly connect to those waters or flow through another eligible feature. The proposal also keeps the long-standing exemptions in place, including prior converted cropland, waste treatment systems, and a newly clarified exclusion for groundwater. A 45-day public comment period will open once the rule is published in the Federal Register. Agriculture groups, like I mentioned, are reacting pretty positively. The American Soybean Association says the proposal offers more clarity after years of shifting interruptions that left farmers unsure whether routine decisions could trigger federal oversight. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association, though, says that the rule more appropriately focuses on major waters instead of ditches and ponds on family operations. And the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture says the proposal recognizes the key role states are already playing in enforcing most Clean Water Act provisions. So just one of the many pieces of news that we're watching.
hopefully more clarity there. But this is a topic that has been part of discussions with a lot of folks this week. That's China, of course, but we got headlines this week. Reuters reported that China made its largest U.S. soybean purchase of the year earlier this week on Monday, buying at least 14 cargoes, the biggest sale since early 2025 and the most significant since Presidents Trump and Xi met at the October summit in South Korea. Traders say the purchases are tied to commitments China made during those talks, even though U.S. soybeans are currently priced higher than comparable shipments from Brazil. A lot of folks are calling this a political move and a political buy, which we'll talk more about here in the coming weeks. According to Reuters, the latest buying spree reflects China's pledge to honor the Busan terms rather than a simple goodwill gesture. China's state-owned grain company COFCO purchased at least 840,000 metric tons for December and January shipment alone. Even during the recent government shutdown, USDA export data showed China buying 232,000 metric tons of U.S. soybeans, bringing total Chinese purchases close to 1 million metric tons. And of course, markets are watching that as well. But again, we've got some really great conversations talking about this very specific topic. Tanner Emke with CoBank. I can't wait to play his interview. We just talked about that earlier today.
Another piece of news that we're watching is that the White House has held separate meetings with oil refiners and biofuel producers as it tries to settle a long-running dispute over federal biofuel blending requirements. According to biofuelsnews.com, the talks center on billions of gallons of blending obligations that were waived for small refineries and whether large refiners should be required to make up those lost volumes. A decision was expected at the end of October, but was delayed by the federal government shutdown, so hopefully we'll see something there here shortly. The administration is working to balance pressure from the oil industry, which says mandates threaten refinery jobs and the ag sector, which argues that the waivers have cut demand for corn, ethanol, and other biofuels. Officials also discussed the possibility of allowing year-round sales of E15. Another issue that we're listening to here at the NAFB convention, gasoline blended with 15% ethanol, of course. That option could be paired with changes to small refinery waivers in hopes of winning support from both sides. The final outcome could have major effects on fuel prices, farm income, and the U.S. energy policy heading into the next year.
Well, this next headline, I'm excited we're going to chat bigger equipment trends for 2026 on the upcoming weeks here. But U.S. sales of farm equipment saw steep declines in October of 2025, according to recent data from the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. Tractor sales fell 19% compared to October of 2024, while combine sales dropped 27%. In Canada, our counterpart to the north, tractor sales were down 11% and combine sales fell 17% over the same period. The largest U.S. drop came in the four-wheel drive tractor segment, which sold just 316 units in October, a 56% decline from last year. Combine sales in the U.S. totaled 376 units, down from 514 in October of 2024, with year-to-date combine sales down 38% from 2024. Kurt Blades, Senior Vice President at AEM, said the decline follows a slight September uptick, but reflects ongoing uncertainty and volatility in the farm equipment market.
I know that you mentioned the conversations that we've heard here at the NAFB convention is just another picture of like what's happening in the industry and 2026 expectations. Here's another piece of news for you. A new survey from the American Bankers Association and Farmer Mac shows ag lenders expect only about half of U.S. farm borrowers to turn a profit in 2025, the lowest level since 2016. Lenders say softer commodity prices, high input costs, and continued pressure from interest rates are squeezing margins, especially for grain and cotton producers. Livestock operations are faring better thanks to strong protein demand and improved feed costs. Though here, nearly 93% of lenders expect farm debt to rise over in the next year, a sign many producers are turning to credit as cash reserves shrink. Lenders say their top concerns are liquidity, declining working capital, and tighter cash flow. More than 70% report their borrowers' working capital worsened over the past year. And over half say supplemental income sources, from wind and solar leases to CRP payments, are now critical to keeping some operations afloat. Government payments have also played a major role, with more than 30% of lenders saying those payments made up at least a quarter of borrower income. Farmland values, though, here remain historically strong, but are expected to level off or soften in 2026 as more land comes on the market. Lenders warn that tighter credit conditions are likely ahead as profitability erodes, forcing tougher decisions for both farmers and their lenders heading into 2026.
Well, Michelle, Thanksgiving is next week, so I'm going to record the show early, but as we look at the cost of cooking a Thanksgiving dinner, it's going to be falling for the third straight year, according to the American Farm Bureau Federation's annual Turkey Holiday Survey. I love it when they put this out. The group estimates that a traditional meal for 10 will average $55.18 this year, or about $5.52 per person. That's a 5% drop, actually, from 2024. Prices, however, remain above pre-pandemic levels after peaking at a record $64.05 in 2022. A sharp decline in turkey prices is driving much of the relief. A 16-pound frozen bird now averages $21.50, or about $1.34 per pound, down more than 16% from last year. While wholesale prices for fresh turkeys are higher, grocers are cutting retail prices and promoting holiday deals to boost demand. Farm Bureau volunteers collected prices during the first week of November, with USDA data showing further declines the following week. Half the survey's Thanksgiving staples, including rolls and stuffing, fell in prices as lower wheat costs helped ease flour-based items. The National Farmers Union also says farmers are still seeing only pennies on the dollar for the foods that make up your Thanksgiving meal. Even as grocery prices remain high. In its annual Farmers' Share of the Food Dollar report, NFU highlights how corporate consolidation across food processing, distribution, and input markets have left family farmers struggling, while consumers face higher prices and fewer choices. This year's breakdown shows farmers earning as little as 2% of the retail price on turkey and dinner rolls, and no more than about 32% on cranberries. The NFU president, Rob LaRue, says the numbers underscore long-standing inequalities in the food system, calling for stronger antitrust enforcement and fairer markets to support both farmers and consumers. So if you're buying your Thanksgiving meal this year, which we already bought a turkey, and I was thinking it did seem a little less expensive than last year. But President Donald Trump this week announced that many fertilizers U.S. farmers rely on will be exempt from reciprocal tariffs, a move industry groups say will lower input costs heading into 2026 planting season. The Fertilizer Institute called the decision extremely good news, noting that while the U.S. produces fertilizer domestically, it still relies heavily on imports during busy seasons like spring and fall application windows. The November 14th executive order removes tariffs as a key product, including urea, ammonium nitrate, UAN, ammonium sulfate, potash, TSP, DAP, and MAP. Analysts at Argus Media say the change should give importers and distributors more certainty after months of shifting trade policy, and could encourage farmers who have been hesitant to book fertilizer early. We sat down here with Josh Linville of StoneX at the National Farm Bureau's National Association of Farm Broadcasters to talk about this very subject and more. So, Michelle, let's turn it over to that conversation with Josh. Well, I'm catching up with Josh Linville of StoneX to talk all things fertilizer. Josh, always appreciate your insight when we have time to catch up in person.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up when we're here at the home city, right? Kansas City's an easy place to get to.
Yeah, and I have to say, I really appreciate the mostly weekly fertilizer update that you put out. I think it does a great job of keeping us and our listeners in tune with what's going on in the fertilizer markets.
Yeah, well, fertilizer's a market that it's hard to find that information, right? It's a lot of it's guarded, and it has been for a long time. It's an older style commodity, so these things need to change. All the volatility is out there, all the risks is out there, the information's got to get out there. It's got to get out to people like you that can get it out to the farmer quicker so they can make better decisions.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of that volatility here. What are some of the biggest factors today that you're watching influencing the fertilizer markets?
If we go globally and we look at nitrogen, right now for urea, it is 100% still supply problems. Now, it is markedly improved from a year ago. Chinese exports have picked up tremendously. That was a big reason why prices ran up here recently, is because they had started to disappear. Russia continues to export quite a bit. We still got quite a few problems in Europe, though. Natural gas prices are high. Production is still only 75% of normal. But it feels to me like a global S&D which is improved, even though the price isn't really reflecting that today. But things are improving on the urea front. UAN's tough just because of all of the barriers to entry for a lot of the countries, for basically Russia. And hydro's got some supply issues. Potash is okay. It's decently priced. But the biggest one I'm still worried about is phosphate. Incredibly high priced. And most of that is still due to the lack of Chinese tons. China is typically historically the world's largest exporter. They usually send out about 8 to 10 million ton. We're going to be happy if they hit 4.5 million ton this year. That's a massive loss, and there's nobody in the wings who can step up their production and fill in that gap.
So, okay, just to make sure I followed all that, is China just simply holding phosphate back from the export market, or they just didn't produce that this year?
We think that they produced it. We don't think that they're exporting. Now, it's China. We never know what the details are, right? They're not real good about sharing information with us, but we think it's twofold. We think, number one, China's been acting like a country that is trying to become less dependent on the world. One of the things they're dependent on is bringing in food. They can't raise enough. Well, if you want your people to raise more food, what do you tell them? Well, put more fertilizer on. And so put more phosphate on. Increase your rates a little bit. Hopefully that will raise more food. The other side of it is battery manufacturing has flipped over, and now all of a sudden the new technology is phosphate. And so we think that based on how big of a battery manufacturer they are, that's a lot of new demand. So I don't know that production is down significantly. I think their demand domestically is up quite a bit, and they're just saying, we don't really need to export this like we used to. And I'm afraid that's going to be a longer-term situation.
So as we think about some other factors influencing price, logistics, right, is a big one I know you watch, with water levels, some of the things going on in the Houthi rebel fight.
Yeah.
What are some of the logistical considerations right now?
Fortunately, things have slowed down. I'm not going to say all the problems are gone. It's just the market has gotten very good over the last several years of dealing with these setbacks. You take the Houthi rebel, for example. Terrible situation. The vessel that was sank was a fertilizer vessel. I believe it was coming from Saudi Arabia. The fortunate part is you can swing those vessels down around Africa and then back up around. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer, a little bit more money, but you can work your way around it. When you look at the North America river system, yeah, there's been some low water levels, but again, the market's done a very good job of working their way around it and making it go. So the market's very resilient, very good about working their way around it. But yeah, it seems like there's always more problems than less.
Josh, let's talk about application. We had an earlier harvest this year, so a lot of growers have maybe gotten in and done some fall field work. What are your estimates as far as how much have been done this fall versus what's going to be left to do in the spring?
Right now, we are expecting anhydrous to actually be bigger than normal. Part of that reason being, obviously, to your point, harvest is done. It got done earlier, and the wide open weather window helps the farmers get out there and get it done. Not to mention, anhydrous is the cheapest form of nitrogen on a price per pound of N. This is a year where the farmers are really struggling, so they're looking at whatever path forward they can find that's a little bit cheaper, and anhydrous is that path. So we think that's going to be a bigger than normal average. Mother Nature will determine just how much bigger it's going to be. Potash demand we think is going to be about normal, maybe a little bit bigger. Let's face it, big yields this year. Big yields remove a lot big nitrogen or big nutrients from the soil that have to be replaced for the next year's crop. Phosphate's the question mark. Phosphate is incredibly high priced. It's the single fertilizer that everybody talks about the most where they're going to make their cut. It is incredibly high priced versus itself. It's incredibly high priced versus grains, and people are saying, I have to make a cut somewhere. Phosphate's that first one I'm going to consider if I do. Now, we are hearing more and more people say demand is better than we expected, and we'll see how this plays out over the next 30 days, but so far we do believe there's demand destruction there.
Okay. And so as we think about then anhydrous fall application, spring application, my assumption based on that is we've probably locked in most of what we need, at least for the fall. What about for the spring?
This is where anhydrous is unique. Most other products, you can kind of buy it when and where you want to. Anhydrous, you have to wait for the manufacturers to come out with their fill programs. There are very few manufacturers, fewer still storage sites across the U.S., the owners of that. So what they'll do is they'll wait until closer to Christmas and they'll digest the entire fall season. They'll say, okay, it was good, it was bad. And they'll use that information to come up with their winter fill program. How high or low price is that? And then they will start to back into what is our spring prepaid number. So we're still probably 30 to 45 days out before we even have an idea of where they're going to price that. And frankly, the next 30 days is going to determine a lot as far as what that number is going to look like.
Josh, I know you focus a lot on the pricing aspect of it, but I'm curious to know some of your thoughts on, we've seen, especially under this administration, a big focus on pushing for more domestic fertilizer production. What's your outlook there?
I love the steps that have been taken. I wish they were different steps, but I will take any attention we can get. So most of the money, most of the attention that's been placed in the fertilizer has been placed on increasing potash production. And I understand why they're doing this. When you look at U.S. demand, we are highly, highly reliant on imports. And if you stop the story right there and you look at how much, I mean, it's a tremendous amount that we bring in.
Do you know maybe a stat?
It's over 80% of the needs. But the problem for all the potash.
Okay.
But the problem is most of that comes from Canada. Canada is the world's largest producer of potash. They are a very, very close ally of ours. Even if we can do a little economic tit and tat, here and there, we're still very close allies. So from a potash perspective, it's the best price. It's the best supplied out there. It's the one we need the least amount of help with. We need something to help us with our phosphate supplies. The unfortunate part of there is if we don't have access to phosphate rock reserves, which I'm not sure where new ones are today, you can't do anything there. The one we can do something about is nitrogen. We have very cheap natural gas. We can produce this stuff here at home. We don't have to ship it halfway around the world. People say, well, it's a dirty production. We can produce it cleaner than the rest of the world can with our economic standards, whether that's in the U.S. or in Canada. And politically, we're stable, so you don't have to worry about what's this country going to look like in 5 to 10 years. So nitrogen is the one I wish the administration would spend a little bit more time looking at and considering putting some of those investments there. I think that's the one that could really, really help us.
Any advice for producers listening who maybe haven't locked in all of their needs?
Make rational decisions. And I say that from the standpoint, these prices are outrageous. The grain prices are not low enough. The farmer is struggling. And a lot of this is being done. Some of it has to do, obviously, with just the market S&D, right? We're really good at producing grains. That means prices are lower. But another chunk of it has to do with a lot of these economic tariffs and duties and everything else the government's put in place. So the farmer is having to fight these fights with their financials. And I understand how frustrating that is and how angry that makes people and sad and depressed and everything else. But when it comes time to start making marketing decisions, we've got to take the step back and try to remove that emotional aspect. Try to just be cold-blooded and try to be like, listen, this is the best choice for right now. This is the best chance for a layer today. And listen, if that's a profitable layer and it's the worst decision you make, that's a very good year.
Josh, is there anything we missed that you want to make sure we touch on?
One thing I do want to talk about. On vacation, my wife and I went down to Orlando, and I came back and was working through my emails on Monday. The Trump administration decided they are going to remove fertilizers from tariff considerations. This has been a big thing, right? Because especially for urea, we import 5.5 million ton. Well, a lot of the countries we import that product from had a 10 to 30% tariff rate on them. That is now removed. Now those products can start coming in freely. We did see NOLA urea values down $25 a ton Friday. They've since recouped all but about $5 of that, but that did help us out. We're going to be able to see flows coming in better without any sort of restrictions. Phosphate is where it really helped. Prices are down probably $50 to $60 a ton for Q1 months. So that basically what it does, we still can't get product from China. Russia and Morocco still have countervailing duties on them, but it frees up the Saudi Arabia flow, assuming our price is correct versus some of their other alternatives. But that was a major win for the farmer. It's not the silver bullet. It's going to correct the entire marketplace. It's not going to cause these prices to fall to the floor, but it helps out quite a bit. It helps the supply side.
Wonderful. Josh, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Anytime.
Well, here at the NAFB convention, we also heard a market panel discussion to hear some of those leaders in that area. Let's hear what they had to say about what's going on in markets and what farmers should know in 2026.
But then something happened in Iowa and portions of Missouri with southern rust. And my clients in Iowa have never really dealt with southern rust before. And so it was a new thing. They sprayed once, not twice, not 3 times. And so at harvest, they were a little surprised with the dramatic yield reduction. I only had one client in Iowa who had, for him, better than last year yields. Everyone else in Iowa that I work with was literally 20 bushels below last year. This is Iowa. So this has the potential to become a big deal. Corn demand is the bright spot in this whole marketplace. Corn demand for ethanol, solid, closer to 5.5 billion bushels. So a third of what we grow goes right to ethanol. We're having record corn exports this year of 3 billion bushels. Fantastic. Now, the thing about this export number is that when the government was shut down, there may have been a lot of corn sold at cheap values because it wasn't getting reported out to all of us daily for how much is actually out there. But the USDA accounted for that on the most recent WASDE report by increasing the exports.
You came in here a couple weeks ago and the bean market rallied on the anticipation that Scott Bessent was going to cut a deal with the Chinese. Coming out of the weekend, Scott Bessent said, we have a deal, and the bean market rallied. A few days later, President Trump came out and said, we have a deal, and the bean market rallied. And then here recently, the Chinese actually fulfilled part of the deal, a very small portion of it. They did start buying beans, and the bean market rallied again. So I've been doing this for 30 years. I can tell you, I've never seen a market where you bought the rumor 3 times, and then you turn around and bought the fact.
Well, Michelle, as we look back to recent events, of course, last week was the first WASDE report since September. And in that November WASDE report, we saw a mixed outlook for our major U.S. crops and oilseeds. The agency trimmed the national corn yield to 186, which a lot of analysts are saying that wasn't enough, which does pull our 2025-2026 production down slightly to about 16.75 billion bushels. Exports were raised to just over 3 billion bushels, pushing ending stocks to 2.15 billion bushels and lifting the average farm price to now $4 per bushel. Soybean yields were also lowered to 53 bushels per acre, dropping production to 4.25 billion, and USDA cut soybean export estimates to 1.64 billion bushels and now projects ending stocks at about 290 million, with a farm price of $10.50. Wheat production was left unchanged at 1.99 billion bushels, though ending stocks increased to 901 million. Globally, the USDA also raised starting stock levels for corn and wheat while trimming soybeans and boosting production estimates for Argentina, Australia, and Russia. And as Brazil is in planting season now for soybeans, that is likely going to be a massive crop as well. Again, some great conversations we're having this week at NAFB convention. A lot of these topics we touched on, and we'll be playing those over the next few weeks here on the Ag News Daily Podcast.
It's great to have a special booth here, but we'll be back next week, Friday. So after you have your Thanksgiving meal, feel free to come tune in to Ag News Daily, wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course on social media.
With that, Michelle, what do you say we let people go?
Let's let them go.